For 45 years, it was my job to read the river. And the first thing the river ever taught me is that the smoothest water is the most dangerous. A man who does not know the river looks at a stretch of slick, glassy, untroubled water and thinks, there, that is the safe place to cross. And the riverman knows that the glassy water is glassy because something is pulling underneath it, hard and silent, a deep snag or a drowning current, and that the safe water is the rough water, the water that shows you what it is doing. I ran the cable ferry across the river at Mars Landing for 45 years, and I carried every soul in that county back and forth 10,000 times, and not once did I lose a one. Because I learned young to distrust a calm surface and to read the trouble running silent underneath it. I would have told you there was no man alive better than me at seeing the danger hidden under a smooth and pleasant face. And then a smooth and pleasant face walked up onto my porch one spring afternoon, and I forgot every single thing the river ever taught me, because by then I was lonely. And loneliness, it turns out, was the one current I never learned to read. My name is Vernon Pike. I am 74 years old, and I ran the Mars Landing ferry in southern Illinois my whole working life. I want to tell this slow, the way the river moves, because the thing that nearly took my home and the last of my good sense was not a flood and not my age. It was a young woman with a kind face who saw, faster than I did, exactly how alone I was, and used it, the way the river uses a calm surface, to pull a man down where he cannot see it happening. Let me set the landing first, so you understand the shape of the water. I was born a quarter mile from where the ferry crosses, and I went to work on it at 17, and I took it over at 30, and I ran it until the state finally built the bridge upriver, and the ferry that had crossed for 100 years was not needed anymore. 45 years of pulling that cable ferry back and forth across a quarter mile of moving water, in the fog and the ice and the spring floods when the river came up brown and angry and full of whole trees. I knew that river the way you know a person you have lived with your whole life. Its moods, its lies, the places it pretended to be gentle, and the places it told you the truth. I carried everything across that water. School buses full of kids in the morning, hearses on their way to the cemetery on the far bank. A doctor once at 2 in the morning racing to a birth, ambulances, tractors, courting couples, a whole county's worth of living and dying. Back and forth, on a flat boat tied to a cable strung bank to bank. People think a ferry just floats across. It does not. The current wants to take you downstream every second you are on it, hard. And the only reason you go straight is the cable and the man reading the water, angling the boat against the push so the river's own force walks you across the very thing trying to sweep you away. The high water crossings are the ones that taught me. I have taken that ferry across in a spring flood with whole uprooted cottonwoods coming down the channel like battering rams, the brown water boiling, and the trick, the only trick, was to never once believe the smooth, slick patches were the safe road. Because the smooth patches were where the deep current ran fastest and a snag waited to hole you. Rough water you can see. Smooth water lies. 45 years. I bet my life and the lives of everyone aboard on that one piece of knowing, every single day, and the river never once got me, because I never once trusted a pretty surface. Remember that I knew this. It is the whole bitter joke of the thing that came after. And the whole of those years, the thing that held me steady against all of it, the cable I was tied to, was a woman named Clara. Clara was my wife for 46 years. She grew up on the far bank. I used to say I married a woman from across the river, which in our county was nearly marrying a foreigner. She rode that ferry with me on slow afternoons just to be beside me. She was the steady line that kept me from drifting. The way the cable keeps the ferry from being swept downstream, no matter how hard the current pulls. And a ferry without its cable is not a boat. It is just a thing the river takes. Clara died 3 years before any of this, quick, a thing in her chest. And when she went, the cable parted. and I learned what the ferry would have learned if you cut its line in high water. I drifted. I do not have good words for the loneliness, and I have tried to find them. It was not sharp. That is the thing nobody tells you. It was not a wound you can tend. It was a slow brown rising, like the river coming up over the low ground a foot a day, so gradual you do not see it move, until one morning you look up and the water is at the door, and you cannot remember the last time your feet were dry. The house got quiet, in a way a house should not be allowed to get. I would catch myself talking to Clara, asking her where she'd put a thing, and then stand in the silence of her not answering. The phone did not ring. Days went by, real days, where the only voice I heard was the radio and my own, saying good morning to the river out of pure habit because there was no one else to say it to. I had been a man people needed for 45 years, the man who got you across, and now the bridge had made me useless and the grave had made me alone. And a man can stand being one of those things, but the two together will hollow him out. I want you to understand that, not for pity, but because that hollow is exactly the thing Sadie came to fill. And you cannot understand why a sound man let her unless you understand how big the hollow was. She did not break into a strong house. She walked into an empty one and called it home. And the lonely fool who lived there was so grateful to hear the word that he did not ask whose home she meant. I had no children. We were not given any, which was the one sorrow of an otherwise good marriage. And so when Clara died, I was a man alone in a house by a landing that did not need a ferryman anymore, in a county where the bridge had made me unnecessary, and the loneliness came up around me slow and brown and silent, like the river in flood. And I did not know how to read it, because I had never in my life been alone. That is the water Sadie walked up onto, a smooth, slick, dangerous calm, a lonely old man drifting with his cable cut, and not a soul in the world who would notice for a good long while if he went under. She came up the path to my porch on a spring afternoon, a young woman, maybe 33, with a kind, open face and a way of looking at you like you were the most interesting thing she had seen all day. She said she was sorry to bother me, that she did volunteer visiting with older folks who lived alone through a church program, and that my name had come up, and could she sit a while? And I, who had not had a real conversation in weeks, who talked to the radio and the river, said yes, sit. And she sat, and we talked until the light went long, and when she left I felt something I had not felt since Clara, which was looked at, seen, like a man again instead of a ghost haunting his own porch. She came back. Of course she came back. That was the whole of the plan. Though I could not see the plan, because the plan was built precisely so I could not see it. She came every few days, then every day. She brought me soup. She listened to my stories about the river, really listened, asked the right questions, remembered the answers. You have to understand how good she was at it, because the goodness was the whole weapon. She remembered things. She would come back a week later and ask whether my knee had gotten better, the knee I had mentioned once in passing, and a man who has not been asked about his knee in 3 years feels that small attention like sunlight. She learned how I took my coffee and had it ready. She asked about Clara, gently, and let me talk, and did not change the subject the way people do when an old man starts in about his dead wife. And being allowed to say Clara's name out loud to a face that did not flinch was, God help me, the kindest thing anyone had done for me since the funeral. She brought a little color back into the dead house. She would tease me and I would laugh, and the sound of my own laugh in that silent kitchen startled me the first time. It had been so long. I started shaving again on the days she came. I started looking forward to a tomorrow, which I had not done since Clara. If you have ever watched the river come back to life in the spring after a long grey winter, the green coming up the banks, that is what it felt like. An old, frozen thing thawing, and the cruelty of it, The thing I can hardly bear even now is that the thaw was real. My happiness was real. She manufactured it on purpose to rob me. But the feeling in me was true, which means she did not just try to steal my house. She counterfeited the last bit of joy an old man had left and spent it. She found out, gently, over weeks, everything about me. That I had no children, no close family, that Clara was gone, that the house was paid off and mine, that I had a little money put by. She learned the exact shape of my aloneness, the way I once learned the exact shape of the river bottom, sounding it patiently. And I never once felt sounded, because she did it with such warmth that being known by her felt like the opposite of being robbed. And somewhere in there, she told me a thing that put the hook all the way in. And I want to tell you about it because it is the cruelest part of the whole craft. She told me, one evening, careful, like she was offering me something precious, that her own grandmother had been from across the river, near where Clara grew up, and that she thought maybe their families had known each other, way back. It was probably nothing, she said, but maybe we were connected, a little, through the old families on the far bank. I have no idea if it was true. I think now it was almost certainly a lie. A thing she found in the sounding and used, but it did its work. Because a drowning man does not check the rope that is thrown to him. And she had thrown me a rope that tied her, however thin, to Clara, to the far bank, to the only thing I had ever loved. After that, she was not a stranger. She was family. The family I never had. The granddaughter the river never gave Clara and me. I started to live for her visits. I told myself God had sent her late, as a mercy, to keep an old man company at the end. You can see it, I am sure, from where you sit, with no loneliness pulling at you. You can see the smooth water for what it was. I want you to understand that I could not, and not because I was a fool. I read that river for 45 years. I am not a fool. I could not see it because I did not want to see it. That is the thing the con runs on, the thing under the smooth surface. And it is not the mark's stupidity, it is the mark's hope. I would rather have been robbed than be alone again. And somewhere underneath, I think I half knew, and I looked away on purpose, because the warmth of the lie was so much better than the cold of the truth that I did not want to read the water. That is the snag that nearly took me, not Sadie, my own willingness to drown if drowning came with company. Then, when the hook was deep, the plan turned toward the house. It came so gently, I almost did not feel the current change. Sadie began to worry about me. Out loud, lovingly. What would happen to me if I got sick, if I fell, if I had to go into a home? The county would take the house, she said, to pay for it. That was how it worked. She had seen it happen to other old folks she visited. The state takes the home you worked your whole life for. It would be such a shame, she said. After all Vernon and Clara built, for strangers to get it. And then, like she was just thinking of it, like it was for me and not for her, she said she had a friend who helped older people protect their homes, put them into a trust, or sign them over to someone they trusted to hold safe, so the county could never take them. It was what smart families did, she said. It was just paperwork. It would protect everything, and I would still live there, of course, always. It was just a piece of paper to keep the house safe from the state. To keep the house safe. By signing it over to the granddaughter the river had finally sent me, I tell you, sitting here now, that I can hear how it sounds. I could not hear it then. She had spent 4 months making herself the one person in the world I trusted, the warm hand on the cold water. And now that hand was guiding me, so gently, toward a paper that would take the one thing Clara and I had built and put it in the name of a woman I had known for 4 months, and did not, it would turn out, know at all. And I nearly signed. I have to tell you how near, because it is the truth. And because there may be a Vernon Pike listening who needs to hear that it can happen to a sound man. The papers were drawn. She had set the day. She had a notary friend who would come to the house, so I would not even have to go out. So easy, so kind. And I sat in Clara's kitchen the night before, with the pen practically in my hand, telling myself that this was what family did, that Sadie loved me, that even if there was something off about it, even if some old riverman's instinct in the back of my neck was twitching the way it used to twitch over slick water, I would rather give the house to the girl who sat with me than die alone in it and leave it to the county. I had decided, almost, to drown on purpose, because the water was warm. I even had an argument ready for the twitch in my neck, which is how I know how far gone I was. I told myself, so what if she gets the house when I'm gone? Who else is it for? There's no children. There's no Clara. If I die tomorrow, it goes to the state or to some cousin I've never met. And at least Sadie sat with me. At least Sadie was here. Doesn't a person who shows up earn something? I had it all worked out. A whole reasonable speech for why letting myself be robbed was actually wisdom, actually generosity, actually the smart, sad realism of a man with no one left. That is the most dangerous water there is, and it is not out in the river. It is the water inside your own head that rises up to drown the warning, the voice that takes your deepest loneliness and turns it into a reason to do the very thing that will hurt you most. I have crossed a river in flood, with cottonwoods coming down like rams, and been less close to going under than I was that night at Clara's table. Dry-eyed, with a pen, talking myself calmly toward the bottom. What pulled me back was Burl, and it was the river that did it. Through him, Burl Hasty ran the ferry on the next crossing down for 40 years. He is the only man alive who knows the river the way I do, my oldest friend. And the one person who had been watching all this with the cold eye of a man who is not lonely. He came by, unannounced, the way old rivermen do, and he met Sadie, and he watched her work me for an hour. And after she left, he sat on my porch a long time and did not say anything, which from Burl is a whole speech. And then he said, "Vernon, I have known you 60 years, and I have watched you read water that would fool any other man on this river. You ever see a stretch that smooth, that pretty, that helpful, that did not have something mean running under it?" And I did not answer him, because I could not, because he had just said out loud the thing the back of my neck had been twitching about for weeks, the thing I had been refusing to read because I did not want it to be true. And Burl said, "You taught me my whole life. Never trust the calm water." I'm just asking you to read this one like it was the river. That's all. Read it like the river. I got angry at him. I am not proud of it, but I want it in here, because it is true, and because it is part of how the con works. I told Burl he was a bitter old man who could not stand to see me happy, that he was jealous I had someone, that he did not understand because he still had his kids and his grandkids and a phone that rang. I said hard things to the one man who had come to pull me out, because that is what a drowning man does. He fights the rescuer. He clings to the very current that is taking him. Because letting go of Sadie meant going back under, into the cold, and some animal part of me would rather have drowned warm. Burl took all of it. He did not argue. He just stood up to leave, and at the door he turned and said the thing that finally got through, the only thing that could have. He said, "Vernon, I'm not asking you to stop trusting her. I'm asking you to do one thing, the one thing you'd do for any stranger before you carried them across in high water. Check the boat. If she's what she says, the checking won't hurt her, and you'll feel a fool for an afternoon. If she's not, you'll have saved your own life. That's all I ever did before a crossing. So did you? Check the boat." And then he left. and I stood in the dark a long time, because a man cannot argue with his own life's first rule, said back to him by the only other man who lived it. So I read it like the river, and the moment I let myself actually look, instead of looking away, I saw the snag plain as day, the way you always do once you stop pretending the smooth water is safe. Burl and I did it quiet. We did not let on. I kept being the trusting old fool with Sadie, kept the warmth on my face, because once a riverman knows the snag is there, the dangerous thing is to let the current know you have seen it. And we looked into her, Burl and a young woman at the bank who had gotten a bad feeling of her own when some paperwork came across her desk. And what we found was that Sadie was not Sadie, that the church program she named did not exist, that the name she used was not her name, and that there were two other old people in two other river towns, both alone, both with paid-off houses, who had a kind young woman visiting them too. It came apart fast once we tugged the first thread, the way a snag shows itself the second you stop pretending the water is smooth. The bank woman. Her name was Renata, and she had a grandmother of her own she worried about, had flagged a notary request and a transfer document that did not smell right. And when I came to her, she did not treat me like a foolish old man. She treated me like a witness. And the two of us and Burl started pulling. The church, she said, sent her had never heard of her. The license plate Burl wrote down one evening, the old riverman's habit of noting things, came back to a name that was not Sadie. And then the thing that turned my stomach all the way over. The bank woman knew, through the small-town way that women who work in banks know things, of two other widowed old folks, one upriver and one down, who had each lately acquired a sweet young visitor, and who were each, right now, somewhere in the same gentle current I had been in, being walked toward the same paper. I was not a victim. I was a pattern. I was lot number 3 in an operation that ran the river towns the way I once ran the ferry. Regular as a schedule. Sounding for the deep, lonely water where a house could be taken quiet because there was no one left to hear it go. And the cold that came over me reading that was not the cold of being robbed. It was the cold of those other two, alone, with the pen practically in their hands, and no Burl coming up their path. She was not a lost girl who had gotten greedy. She was a professional, part of a small crew that worked the river towns the way I once worked the river, patiently, sounding for the lonely ones, the ones with no children to notice, the houses with no one left to fight for them. I was not her first old man. I was just the one she picked who, 45 years before, had learned a thing about smooth water that she did not know I knew. And that is when I decided not to be a victim, but a ferryman, which is a man whose whole life is about getting people safely across a dangerous thing. Because I could have called the law right then, and they would have come. And Sadie would have melted back into the river and turned up in another town with another name and another kind face. And the two old people she was already working, and the next ones, would have gone under with no one to pull them out. A snag you only steer one boat around is still there for the next boat. So I did not flinch and I did not call. I let the day of the signing come. I let Sadie believe she had me, that the warm, dumb, lonely old man was going to hand her the house with a grateful tear in his eye. I told her I was ready, that she was the family God sent me, that I wanted her to have it. And she smiled the warm smile and set the day, and brought her notary friend to my house, and brought, because she thought it was safe, the man who ran her, the one whose name was on nothing, who came to collect. And when they sat down at the table with the deed to my house and Clara's house between us, and slid it across to me to sign, the people who came up from the porch and in from Clara's kitchen were not a notary's witnesses. They were two investigators from the state's Elder Fraud Unit who had been listening, with my blessing and a recorder I had been wearing for a week, to every soft word Sadie and her runner had said about the house, and the lonely fool, and the two other marks down the river, and exactly how the whole thing worked. That last week was the hardest acting of my life, and I had never acted in my life. I had to sit across from Sadie knowing what she was, and keep the warm, dumb gratitude on my face. Keep being the lonely old man she thought she had landed, while a recorder the size of a button rode under my shirt, and an old riverman's heart hammered against it. She talked freely, because she thought she had won. And that is the thing about people who hunt the lonely. They get careless near the end. They stop seeing the mark as a person who might be watching back. And so she told me, in that warm voice, more than she ever should have, about how it would all be simple, about her friend, the notary. And once, when her runner was there and they thought I had stepped out, I stood in Clara's hallway and listened to the two of them talk about me the way you would talk about a calf you were walking to the truck, and about the next town, and the one after. And I had to put my hand flat on Clara's wall and breathe and not make a sound. Because every word that turned my stomach was another word that would save the next old soul down the river. The morning of the signing, I fed myself one thought to keep my face right. I told myself, today you are not the mark. Today you are the ferryman, and there are people in this boat, and you are going to get them across. And then I let them come in and sit down and slide the deed across the table, and I picked up the pen. And I let the moment ripen one beat longer than was comfortable. And then I set the pen down and said, I don't believe I will. And the doors opened. The smooth water had run right up onto the rocks, in my own front room, in front of the law, recorded, with the deed she wanted sitting there unsigned, which it stayed. I looked at Sadie across that table, the girl I had loved like the grandchild the river never gave me. And I will tell you what I saw, because it told me the whole truth of what she was. There was no shame in it. For 1 second there was raw animal calculation, the look of a creature figuring the angles of a trap, and then, when she saw there were none, there was just a flat, cold blankness, the face under the face. And I understood that the warm girl who had brought me soup and listened to my river stories had never existed at all, that she had been a mask the whole time over a person who felt exactly nothing for the lonely old man on the other side of it. I had not lost a granddaughter. There had never been one. The cruelest thing she ever did was not trying to take my house. It was making me believe, for 4 good months, that I was not alone, and meaning none of it. Selling a drowning man the rope and planning the whole time to let go. I said one thing to her before they took her out. I told her that I had spent my life carrying people across a dangerous thing, and that what she did for a living was the exact opposite. Finding people who were alone at the edge of deep water and giving them a push. And that I hoped, though I doubted it, that she would someday be lonely enough herself to understand what she sold. She did not answer. The blank face did not change. I do not think the words reached anything, because I do not think there was anything left in there for them to reach. But I said it for me, not for her. The way you say a thing to the river never answers either, and you say it anyway, because some things have to be spoken out loud over deep water, whether or not anything down there is listening. And here is the part I am at peace with. When it was done, the investigators told me that what I had let them do, by playing the fool 1 more week and wearing that recorder, had given them the whole crew, the runner and the woman who called herself Sadie, and a connection to jobs in 3 states, and most of all, the 2 other old people she was working right then, who got a knock on the door and a warning instead of a signing, and kept their homes. I could have just saved myself. Instead, because an old riverman cannot help it, I got the other boats around the snag too. That is the only justice I wanted. I did not need to stand over Sadie and watch her ruined. The law would do with her what the law does, and protect the next lonely county from her, which was the point. What I had wanted, the whole time, once I stopped wanting the warm lie, was to make sure the smooth water did not take anybody else. It will not. Not that crew, not on this river. I still live in the house Clara and I built. It is still mine, it always was. The deed never moved. Because the old fool, it turned out, read the water in time. Burl comes by, and we sit on the porch and watch the river that neither of us works anymore go by. And we do not say much, because we do not have to. I am still lonely. I will not lie to you and say a sting cured it. The cable is still cut. Clara is still gone. But I learned the thing I most needed to learn, almost too late, which is that the answer to the cold water is not to drown in the warm lie. It is to find the real rope, the true ones, the Burls, the few people who will tell you the calm water is dangerous because they love you, not because they want what you have. And I have done something about the loneliness, which is the part Clara would have wanted me to tell you most. There is a program in our county, a real one. I checked it 3 ways, where old folks who live alone get matched up. And I went, expecting to be on the receiving end of it. And instead they asked, would I be willing to visit some others, the homebound ones, and tell them stories. And I said I would. And now, twice a week, I go and sit with men and women more alone than I am, and I let them talk, and I remember their answers, the way somebody once did to me, except I mean it. It turns out the cure for the hollow was never going to come from a stranger walking up my path to fill it. It came from me walking down the path to fill somebody else's. Sadie had the shape of it exactly backward, which I suppose is the whole difference between her kind and the rest of us. She found the lonely and took. I found the lonely and stayed. I almost let my loneliness talk me into the river. I read the water in time, and I decided that one bad current was not going to make me a man who stands on the dock the rest of his life, too scared to cross. Because that is not living either, that is just a different way of drowning. They thought a lonely old man would be the easiest crossing on the river. They forgot that I spent 45 years learning the one thing they were counting on me not to know, which is that the smoothest, kindest, most helpful-looking water is the water you watch the closest. Because that is the water with something underneath it, pulling. I read it in time. The deed never moved, and the far bank, where Clara came from, is still over there, every morning, in the light, reminding me that a man who has learned what the deep water can do is not supposed to stop crossing. He is just supposed to keep reading it true. Clara is over there too. I have decided to believe on the far bank in the light, and one of these mornings the ferry will come for me, the way it came for everyone else in this county for 100 years. And I will get on it. And I will not be afraid of the crossing, because I have made it 10,000 times, and because I read the water in time, and because I did not let the last years of my life go down in a warm and pretty lie. That is enough. For an old ferryman, that is more than enough.